right, strap in, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into a legal case that's got more twists and turns than, well, maybe a Young Thug song. We're going to unpack the wild legal journey of rapper Young Thug. This case has it all. Allegations of gang activity, some seriously controversial legal tactics, and a plea deal that leaves everyone scratching their heads.
This case is really fascinating because it goes way beyond just one artist. It forces us to confront the line between what's art and what's reality, how the justice system grapples with hip-hop culture, and the implications of a rapper's words being used as evidence. It's heavy stuff.
That's for sure. So we're talking about Jeffrey Lamar Williams, better known as Young Thug, a name that's pretty much synonymous with pushing the boundaries of hip-hop, right? I mean, the guy's a Grammy winner, a trendsetter, and an artist who's inspired a whole generation of musicians. When news of his arrest broke back in May 2022, it wasn't just the music world paying attention.
Yeah, no kidding. The accusations were heavy, to say the least. The prosecutors painted Young Thug as a top dog in Young Slime Life, or YSL, which they claimed was a straight-up criminal street gang linked to the Bloods.
YSL, wow, okay.
Yeah, and they hit him with RICO Act violations, drug charges, weapons charges, the whole 9 yards, legally speaking.
And they even went so far as to suggest that his record label, also called Young Stoner Life, was basically a cover for all this alleged criminal activity. The prosecution was relentless. They portrayed him as this huge danger to society. And to top it off, he was initially denied bail. It felt like things were just spinning out of control.
Absolutely. And remember, through all of this, Young Thug maintained his innocence, right? But then, fast forward to October 2024, and in a move that nobody saw coming, he takes a plea deal.
Well, hold on. A plea deal. So he's admitting guilt.
Well, not exactly. It's complicated, kind of a mixed bag. He pleaded guilty to a few of the charges, 1 count of gang activity, 3 drug charges, and 2 gun charges. But for another gang charge and a racketeering conspiracy charge, he entered a no-contest plea.
No contest. Okay,
Yeah.
Gotta ask, what's the difference here? What does that actually mean?
It means he's not saying he's guilty for those specific charges, but he's accepting the consequences, which is where things get interesting. The plea deal didn't come with any agreement with the prosecutors about how he'd be sentenced, so the judge had full power to decide his fate.
Woof. Talk about pressure. So what happened? Did he get hit with a harsh sentence?
Well, the judge initially handed down a 40-year sentence, with the first 5 years behind bars. But then came the plot twist. She commuted that prison time to time served, meaning Young Thug walked free that same day.
Wait, what? He got a 40-year sentence and just walked? How's that work?
It's wild, right? No prison time.
Yeah.
But instead of those 5 years locked up, he now faces 15 years of probation. And those terms are anything but a cakewalk.
Okay, let's break it down. What exactly does he have to deal with during these 15 years?
First up, major location restrictions. He's basically banned from the entire metro Atlanta area for a whole decade.
10 years. Wow.
Think about it. Atlanta, that's where he built his career, his whole life, his connections. It's a huge part of his identity, and he's effectively exiled from it. There are some exceptions, weddings, funerals, that sort of thing, but Atlanta is pretty much off limits.
That's a major blow. Makes you wonder how he can keep his career going with that restriction in place.
And on top of that, there's the community service requirement. 4 times a year, he's got to visit Atlanta and talk about the dangers of gangs and gun violence, targeting schools and youth organizations.
So using his own experience as a warning.
It seems that way, yeah, like they're trying to use his platform to make a positive impact.
So they're trying to spin his situation into something good for the community. I guess that's one way to look at it.
Right. But here's another twist. He's banned from hanging out with any known gang members, except for one big exception.
Oh, here we go. There's always a catch.
Always. He's allowed to associate with his brother, who happens to be the rapper Gunna. They got a pass because of what the court calls contractual obligations.
Interesting. So even though Gunna was also caught up in this case, their professional ties let them stay in contact.
Exactly. It's very specific, right?
So gang members off limits, but his brother gets a special pass. What else?
Well, there's a total ban on anything that promotes gang activity. And I mean anything. No involvement, obviously, but it goes further. No hand gestures, no symbols, nothing that could be seen as gang-related.
So they're basically trying to control his whole image, his message. Makes you think about how this will affect his music, especially in hip-hop, where all that stuff's often part of it.
That's the big question, right? This case goes way beyond the legal stuff. It's about artistic freedom, the limits of self-expression, and how the justice system views and potentially punishes creative work, especially in hip-hop. It's a big conversation.
And that brings us to what's probably the most controversial part of this whole thing, using Young Thug's lyrics as evidence against him.
That's right. They actually brought those lyrics into the courtroom, claiming they were proof of his involvement in real-life crimes. It's a tactic that's gotten a lot of pushback and sparked a huge debate about separating art from reality.
Definitely a conversation we need to have. But first, let's get into how they use those lyrics and why it's caused such a stir.
So how do lyrics, which are, supposed to be creative expression, end up as evidence in a courtroom?
It just feels wrong, like a slippery slope. Are they going to start pulling lyrics from country songs to use as evidence in divorce cases?
It's a valid concern, and it's been a hot topic for years, especially in hip-hop. In Young Thug's case, they zeroed in on lyrics from his song, what was it called? Take It to Trial. Yeah, Take It to Trial. They basically said those verses were like a mirror of real events, proof of his criminal activity.
So they're saying he's confessing to crimes through his music.
Yeah.
That seems like a stretch. I mean, hip-hop's all about storytelling, artistic license, right?
Exactly. And that's what people are arguing against using rap lyrics as evidence. They're saying it completely ignores the context, the metaphors, the whole creative nature of the genre.
It's like watching a Tarantino movie and saying, well, this guy makes violent films, so he must be a violent person.
Right, exactly. It doesn't make sense. And there's this worry that it unfairly targets young Black artists, plays into negative stereotypes, and limits their ability to express themselves freely. It's like saying, sure, you can rap about this stuff, but we might use your words against you later.
Yeah, talk about a creativity killer. You got to wonder if artists are going to start censoring themselves, avoiding certain topics, just to avoid legal trouble.
It's a real concern, and we've seen this happen before in other high-profile cases. Remember Drake Hero, the Ruler? They tried to use his lyrics against him, even though he was ultimately found not guilty.
And what about Mac Miller? Lyrics from one of his songs about drug use ended up being cited in a wrongful death lawsuit, even though that song came out years before the incident they were talking about. It's a scary trend.
No doubt. And it brings up a bigger question. What are the alternatives? If law enforcement wants to use lyrics as evidence, how do we make sure it's fair, that it doesn't violate First Amendment rights?
Maybe they need to show a much stronger link between the lyrics and an actual crime, not just using them to, make the artist look bad.
That's a good point. Or maybe you need experts who actually understand hip-hop musicologists, critics, even other rappers, to explain what's going on in those lyrics, to give them context.
Right. You can't just take the words at face value. You have to understand the whole genre, the history, the culture behind the music.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that rap, just like any art form, should be judged on its own merits, not on stereotypes or assumptions.
So where do we go from here? Young Thug's case has really brought this issue to the forefront, forced everyone to face these tough questions.
It's a conversation that needs to involve everybody. Artists, legal experts, lawmakers, the public. We got to find ways to protect free speech, A&D, make sure the justice system works properly so that artists can be creative without worrying their work will be used against them.
It's a tough balance to strike. If we start punishing people for their art, where does it stop? What other forms of expression become off limits? It's a dangerous road to go down.
Absolutely. It's about finding that sweet spot. Artists should be able to push boundaries, explore tough themes, and challenge the status quo without the fear of ending up in court because of their creative work.
And as much as this whole debate about lyrics as evidence is important, we also have to remember Young Thug is facing a long road ahead, even though he's not behind bars.
Right. He's got those 15 years of probation hanging over his head with all those restrictions. That's going to have a huge impact on his life, both personally and professionally. It's not easy.
Especially that band from Atlanta. 10 years. That's a long time. You have to wonder if that's actually about rehabilitation or just punishment and control.
Good point. Some people say it might actually hurt more than it helps, isolating him from his support system, his collaborators, his home.
It's almost like a modern-day exile. Like they're taking him away from the very place where he's accused of committing these crimes.
And think about this. He's actually allowed to travel internationally for work, but he can't even move freely within his own city. It's bizarre.
It really shows you how complex the justice system is, right? How do you punish someone and help them turn their life around at the same time? That's a tough question.
It is. And there's another interesting angle here. The difference between Young Thug's sentence and what some of the other people involved in the case got.
Right, some of his co-defendants got way longer sentences, even though they weren't considered the leaders of the supposed gang. So how do you explain that?
It's a reminder that plea deals are tricky. They can be unpredictable. The outcomes can be completely different depending on the person, the charges, the type of plea they make, and of course, the judge.
But it makes you wonder about fairness. You know, did Young Thug's fame and resources help him get a better deal than the others who might not have had those same advantages?
It's a question worth asking. It speaks to those bigger issues within the system. Do certain people have better access to lawyers? Do judges treat some defendants differently than others? We need to think about that.
It's like Young Thug's case is this unique situation, but it also highlights these larger problems with the criminal justice system. It reminds us that justice isn't always equal.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call. We need to keep fighting for a system that's fair and just for everyone, no matter who they are, how much money they have, or how famous they are.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into Young Thug's story,
Mm.
let's circle back to him and what lies ahead.
Mm.
No prison time, but he's got a tough road ahead. 15 years of probation, all those rules he has to follow. I mean, what do you think is going through his head right now? Is he relieved to be out of prison? Or does it feel like he's trapped under a microscope for the next decade and a half?
I bet it's a whirlwind of emotions, honestly. On one hand, he's free, he can make music, be with his family, and try to put his life back together. But those probation conditions are going to be there every step of the way. It's a lot to handle.
It's like a constant reminder of everything that's happened. And speaking of reminders, there's that band from Atlanta, too.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. For the next 10 years, his life, his career, everything is going to be affected by the fact that he can't go back to the city where he made his name. How does he adapt to that? How does he stay connected? How does he collaborate with other artists?
Almost like the court is making him reinvent himself, as a person and as an artist.
And that's what's going to be so interesting to watch, right? How will this whole experience change his music? Will he rap about different things now? Will his message change? Will he become more vocal about criminal justice reform, use his platform to speak out about what he's gone through?
So many possibilities.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure. Young Thug's story isn't over. This is a new chapter. It's going to be full of challenges, changes, and hopefully some successes along the way.
It's a story that makes us think about tough questions, about the justice system, about the role of art in our society, and about what happens to artists who push boundaries.
So what do you think about all of this? What's your take on Young Thug's saga? Where do you stand on using rap lyrics as evidence? Do you think his probation terms are fair? And what do you think the future holds for him?
Lots to think about, for sure. It's a reminder that law, art, and personal freedom, they're all tangled up together, and things are constantly changing.
Absolutely. If you're just joining us, we've been unpacking his arrest, the controversial use of his lyrics as evidence, that unexpected plea deal, and his 15-year probation sentence. We've got a lot to cover still, so let's jump right back in.
One thing that really struck me about those probation conditions is how specific they are. It's not just about avoiding criminal activity. It's about controlling his image, his associations, even his means of expression.
Right, like that whole thing about no gang signs or symbols, it seems almost impossible to enforce, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what constitutes a gang sign anyway? Is it just hand gestures? What about clothing, tattoos, song lyrics? Where do you even draw the line?
It's super vague, and that's where things get tricky. It leaves a lot of room for interpretation, which could potentially set Young Thug up for more legal trouble down the line. Imagine a scenario where he's performing, the crowd's hyped, and he makes a spontaneous gesture that someone interprets as gang-related. Suddenly, he's back in court facing a probation violation.
That's scary. It almost feels like he's walking on eggshells, constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. And then there's the travel ban, right? No Metro Atlanta for 10 years. How's a guy supposed to build a career, maintain relationships, stay connected to his roots with a restriction like that?
It's a tough one. On the one hand, you could argue it's a way to keep him away from negative influences, to create distance from the environment where he allegedly got caught up in criminal activity, but it also raises questions about fairness and proportionality.
Yeah, like, is it really necessary to completely exile him from his home city? Couldn't they have come up with some kind of compromise, maybe restricted travel to certain areas or times of day?
It's a balancing act, for sure.
And then there's the impact on his family, his community. He's a father, a son, a friend. Those relationships are inevitably going to be strained by his inability to be physically present in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
This isn't just about one man, it's about all the people connected to him. And on top of that, there's this community service requirement. 4 times a year, he has to go back to Atlanta and talk to young people about the dangers of gangs and gun violence. I mean, that's got to be a heavy burden to carry, right?
No doubt, it's a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
Imagine going back to your hometown, facing the community where you're accused of causing harm, and trying to deliver a message of redemption. It's going to be emotionally draining, for sure. But there's also an opportunity there, right? A chance to use his platform, his influence, to make a real difference, to connect with young people who might be on a similar path and steer them in a different direction.
It's a powerful story to tell. And if he's sincere about turning his life around, those community service visits could be transformative, not just for the young people he's talking to, but for him as well. It's a chance to give back, to repair some of the damage that's been done.
It'll be interesting to see how he approaches it, what kind of message he chooses to share. Will he stick to the script, focusing solely on the dangers of gang involvement? Or will he go deeper, talking about his own struggles, his mistakes, his hopes for the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you balance personal accountability with a message of hope? How do you inspire change without sugarcoating the harsh realities of the choices he's made?
It's a delicate balance,
Mhm.
and one that's likely to play out in the public eye. His every move, every word is going to be scrutinized, analyzed, debated.
That's the price of fame, I guess, especially when you're caught up in a legal case like this. There's no escaping the spotlight.
And it makes you think about all those co-defendants, the ones who didn't get plea deals, who are now facing decades behind bars. Their stories are just as important, just as complex, but they're often overshadowed by the headlines about Young Thug.
It's easy to get caught up in the celebrity aspect of all this, but we can't lose sight of the bigger picture. This case is a stark reminder that the justice system doesn't always work the way it should, that wealth, fame, and access to resources can influence outcomes, even when it comes to something as fundamental as freedom.
Absolutely. It's a call to action to continue pushing for reform, for a system that's truly just and equitable for everyone, regardless of their background or their circumstances.
It's about ensuring that everyone has a fair shot, that justice isn't just a word, but a reality.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the twists and turns of Young Thug's legal journey, the controversial tactics employed by the prosecution, the complexities of plea deals, and the far-reaching consequences of those probation conditions. But I think the most important takeaway from all of this is the need for ongoing dialogue, for critical thinking, for a deeper understanding of how law, art, and social justice intersect in our society.
Absolutely. Young Thug's case is a microcosm of larger issues that we need to keep talking about, keep challenging, keep fighting for. It's about ensuring that justice is served, that creativity is protected, and that everyone has a chance to turn their life around, no matter their past.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This is a story that's far from over. It's a story that will continue to unfold in the years to come, with both challenges and opportunities along the way. And we'll be here to follow it every step of the way, unpacking the complexities, asking the tough questions, and striving for a deeper understanding of what it all means. So until next time, keep those conversations going, stay curious, and keep pushing for a more just and equitable world for all.